Welcome to the Public Sector Manager Magazine Roundtable, and I'm your host, Tsegofatso Mudubu. Today, we are hosting esteemed women from different facets of life and different sectors, and we are talking about women empowerment, a very apt topic for this Women's Month in 2027. And today in our studio at the Government Communication and Information System, we've got our colleague who is Tandiwe Mashazi from the Commission for Gender Equality. We also have Karishma Govender from the National Empowerment Foundation. We've also got Ms. Mari Glennie from the Tears Foundation and Ms. Carol Maila from the Mining Qualifications Authority. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for availing yourself to come here. I'd like to start with you, Mari. Gender-based violence in South Africa is one of the key topical issues, and it has been classified as a second pandemic. Can you just tell us about the work of the Tears Foundation and how it's actually working with different NGOs, with the state as well, to really ensure that women are empowered as victims of gender-based violence, but also the prevention aspects of gender-based violence?
Thank you for asking that great question. It's something we all need to know. One of the things that is difficult in our country is that access to services are limited. So it's a very important thing. I started Tears on my dining room table 14 years ago, and before I left today, they told me that this year, up till from January to this date, we've received 32,413 inbound calls. That's a lot of calls. That shows you that the problem is big, and we're not the only facility in South Africa that offers services. So the problem is really very big. But it's underserviced. Why do I say that? I say that because we have amazing laws. We have amazing many other things, legislation, etc. But we don't have the service. The service fails our victims. So we definitely need to look at improving our access to service, because for women to be empowered, they have to be whole. And if you've been raped, beaten, abused, or any other of the GBV things, you cannot just put that behind you and walk on. You have to go through a process of healing. So for me, that's a very, very important aspect of GBV. And so multi-sectoral collaboration is an absolutely vital aspect of that. So we try to collaborate with as many diverse groups and people as we can, so that the people who come to us can be helped. Interestingly, in the last few months, since the economy's got tighter, we've seen the number of calls from males increasing. It's a very, very scary thought that we have so many injured people walking around. So from my side, I'm thrilled to be here today because I've made new friends. We had a good chat before we came to the table. We're definitely all going to be working together, and we've enhanced our sphere. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Mari, for that. And just over to you, Karishma. I think Mari's raised a critical issue about, when the economy is tight, they also tend to see how people are affected and distressed. And I think one of the roles of the National Empowerment Fund is to actually ensure that citizens, but in particular women, are able to access funding to run their own businesses and to contribute meaningfully to the economy. So if you can just unpack that for us.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that is so important that we need to consider when it comes to women empowerment is the access to, or the ability to earn a living. It really just gives you the ability to do so much more. And if you're not able to generate an income, you are very reliant on people around you that may, that may be more powerful, or that maybe you find yourself in abusive relationships that you can't get out of because you just don't have the means to get out of those situations. So we at the NEF do take women empowerment very seriously. I think for me particularly, it's a personal cause that I would like to drive as much as possible as well. And because of that, we actually have a specific fund. It's called the Women Empowerment Fund, where we look at funding women-owned businesses. And in that initiative, we also, provide them with a lot of support, because we know that it's not easy as a woman to necessarily enter the business space. There's a lot of restrictions. There's a lot of things that stand in your way, especially things like access to market, the lack of maybe collateral to raise funding, and just lack of opportunities as well, just to be given a seat at the table sometimes. So we understand the environment that we work in, and we really try to unblock those obstacles. And that's why we provide not just the funding for the business itself, but also non-financial support. So we actually give them mentorship, back office services. If the business is in trouble at some point, we assist them with business turnarounds. So it's really to make sure that whatever we do to support a woman prosper. Because when we give them that economic empowerment and that freedom to earn a living, it really takes them to a different place. And also, all the literature says that when you empower women in your society, it actually uplifts the society as a whole. Because the way that women employ the funds that they have leads to everybody in their families and their communities being empowered and rising above poverty and all of the social issues. So we feel that by doing this, it's also addressing a lot of the social issues that we face in South Africa. And the other thing I want to mention is that at the NEF, we also really try to make sure that our funding goes to the underserved communities. So I mean, we really go to places that are sometimes even forgotten about, the deep rural areas where women may not have even heard of the NEF. No one would have heard of the NEF because it's so rural and cut off in terms of communication. But we try and source the transactions and the deals for the small entrepreneurs that are trying to make a living in those areas, and take our funding to places where it's going to make the biggest impact, and those that are economically impoverished.
Thanks for that. I think this links to a recent study by the Commission for Gender Equality, and I think Tandiwe can give us a picture of what really rural women go through, and how is it that the gap that you bridge as the NEF is so critical, because there are also contentious issues around access to land, particularly for rural women. So Tandiwe, if you can just give us the picture there, so that we can also contextualize how the NEF's work, bridges this gap and this divide of empowerment.
When it comes to rural women, it's a sad story, not even a sad, a sobbing story, because what one person that is sitting in an office and imagine what a rural woman is, you just think maybe somebody who doesn't have maybe nice makeup to do good or something of that sort. But the issues are quite deep. So as she just mentioned, that they actually provide funding, I think it's quite a good initiative, in the sense that most women in rural areas, they are uneducated. They try by all means to fend for their families. Then most of them, it's women-led households where men live and maybe go to the city centers to look for jobs and they never come back, where some men go to work in mines and they never come back, or maybe they remarry in the cities, right, leaving them vulnerable, having to raise and tend for kids and deal with traditional leaders who still have this patriarchal, norms in their leadership, to the point that even when services such as yours come in, they don't even reach the intended target group. You might find that the chiefs or the people that are in power, which is the traditional leaders, they administer those services. You communicate, like let's say your service, you communicate directly to the traditional leaders. They don't give the service to the intended women who have the small corporations where they say, let's start a farming business so that at least we can fend for their families. So such services, they don't reach the targeted population. But the chiefs, they'll just say, okay, I know my niece, I know my uncle. They divert the services that are intended for the targeted group. So I think when it comes to the issue in rural areas, yes, there's digitization, but I still feel, or we still feel that it's better if maybe services that are intended to empower women, they're actually done in the communities of reach. Let's say you go to that particular community and say, hey, I'm here, I don't want to speak to the traditional leaders, can you speak to the women themselves? You know, if it means for you signing in with them, the corporations, and make sure you've got their contact numbers, obvious emails, I think they don't work, especially when it comes to rural areas. So you just need to communicate with them, empower them, teach them. Most of them, as I said, they're uneducated. So even if you say just fill in your forms, they will just mess up the application process, to which maybe it might trigger them not being, part of the system. So I think through your trainings as well, through trainings for any other service that empower them, just do that intense workshop, teach them, okay, fill in this form, submit this, so that in future they know what we're talking about. And just to add on, there's another study that we did on farm workers, like women working on farms. So that study had a first series 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025 financial year, and to which some of the things that we found, they are so absurd. Our public service is failing women, like literally women, especially in the rural areas. There are some cooperatives of young women who have said, okay, I'll pass my matric, I cannot find a job, I've tried this, I've tried that, but can I at least start something on my own? The government service, different government services, departments, they'll come in, like let's say the Department of Agriculture will come in, different NGO, different service providers, like let's say yours, they'll come in and say, we're providing funding. You know what they do? I think it was an issue in Mpumalanga where the Department of Agriculture, will come with I don't know if it's called a starter pack, like where they give you a wheelbarrow, seeds, and so they just come, even tractors, they just come and give this particular group or a corporation, they give them. They don't skill those people on how to use those particular seeds. With seeds, like let's say it's maize seeds, it's seasonal. You need to test the soil, all those steps, they don't teach the women. It's during whatever season they plant avocados. Maybe it's not the right time for avocados to be, planted. Then they yield nothing. Then when they say, no, but we gave you starter pack, we gave you all this, why are you coming to us and saying once, or, you didn't get the services? Then we found tractors, the ones that they use. They were seated there. Why? No one was empowered, trained, and taught how to use these particular tractors effectively and efficiently. Then if maybe you need to have a driver or they are not trained. So even if we're saying let's empower them, train them first, skill them, educate them, take them step by step, because it's more like you're dealing with a newborn. You're right. Take them step by step. Don't just assume that they need money for this cooperative to work. They need money for this stock fills. Some of them, they don't even know how to do stock fills, little income generators, you understand? So I think as a nation, we need to start back to the basics. Let's train them. How do we train them? Let's not assume you're speaking to Tandu who has an access to a laptop or a smartphone. You're speaking to someone who maybe doesn't even have a grade 12, so they don't even know how to even put their signature down. So they also rely on their kids who, after they've sacrificed to take them to school, they relocate and come to the city areas and they never come back.
And can I just add, I think one of the things that's important with what you're saying is that if you're doing something to address women empowerment or women economic empowerment, we need to make sure that whatever you do is effective. And what you're doing is solving the problem and not ticking a box. Because once you have the box ticking approach, you've done what you need to do as an institution, but it hasn't achieved anything.
Exactly.
So I think if you have people in organizations that really understand the purpose of what is being done, and the end results that could potentially come from that, and how much it affects not just one life but the multiplier effect of how many lives are affected in each of those households and each of those families, you may have a different response, because then you're getting people that truly believe in what they do and are going to see it through to the end.
I totally agree, and I think I want to bring Carol in here, because she's working in the mining space, particularly in training, and I'd like, Carol, for you to just chime in and make us understand how empowering women in rural areas, urban areas, through social labor plans, right, which are signed between mining companies and communities in which they're established, as well as through the department that is responsible for that sector, how that actually assists women to fully participate and be fully equipped, to really enjoy the seeds of beneficiation, and what comes out of such a thriving economic activity such as mining.
Okay, let me just explain what the mining SETA does. So the MQA is a SETA, is a government entity which reports to the Department of Higher Education and Training, one of the 21 SETAs. So our mandate is to train people that work in the mines to address issues of transformation, skills development, and issues of health and safety. Also people that are not working in mines, graduates, we give bursaries to the people that want to study in areas that are related to mining or engineering, but out of the budget of 100% of the bursary fund, 80% goes to people that are studying in areas that are related to mines. But the 20% is for anyone else that wants to study in a TVET college, in a university, or in a particular university of technology. So that's what we do. But my responsibilities in my department is I'm responsible for mine community development, which is training of unemployed youth, small-scale business. We're trying to address the artisanal training, the zamazamas, kind of train, so people do not do illegal mining or start mining without even the correct training. Only if they are local. We leave in the criminals out of it. Then so this mine community program relates to exactly what she's talking about. It relates to women that might be living in mining communities, or women that might be living in rural areas, and that's our biggest focus, to say you don't have skills. You want to do anything in agriculture, for example. It can be agriculture, it can be anything. You don't have the right skills. So you require in those kind of trainings. So we will fund you and train you in those kind of skills that you have identified as a need. So just to take an example, if, for example, you can see the silos in which we're working in as government, because the Department of Agriculture, for example, I've never heard of that kind of study. It would be interesting to go through it and go to the Department of Agriculture and say, can we work together? You have these tools that you want to give, or the startup kits that you want to give to people, or that you've already given to people. You've allocated them a piece of land. I have the money for training, perhaps themselves an agri-SETA. Then we can go there and train these women and ensure that they have the right licenses, they have the right skills to do this kind of training, find them mentors, and we will fund that. So exactly what she's saying, make sure that there is a multiplier effect, and make sure that there is an impact and a difference that you're making. Don't just dump and tick a box and say, okay, I've given them startup kits and therefore my work is done. Because the whole point of this skills development is, let's train people to make an impact. Let's make a difference. Let's establish those kind of cooperatives that are working, so these people can also be able to create jobs for people that are living in local in those local areas. So that's the whole point of this program that we are dealing with. But we are also moving into just to come to your question, we are moving into, with the department that I'm responsible for, collaboration with mines, taking their SLP funds and say, okay, you have SLP, I have the grants from the SETA. Let's put this money together. Let me see what you are doing on site, and therefore let's put this money together and do something big that is more impactful. Because if it's just a small little program that I'm responsible for, and I come to the SETA and say I want to train 30 people in agriculture, what impact am I going to make? I'm probably going to be the only person that is going to benefit and make a little bit of profit out of that money, but the impact is going to be little. So I'm saying, let's go big. Let's involve the municipalities, let's involve other provincial governments, let's come up with programs. So there are programs that we are working on. There's one that we are launching on the 3rd of September, handing over certificates in Middleburg. We're working with ESCOM, we're working with the different departments and economic departments of the provincial departments in Mpumalanga on a project that's more impactful, because as soon as the power station is closed, there are other things that other people can do, energy related. And therefore they come up with a program like that, and we said, okay, local economic development, identify your people. How much do we have? Well, how much do we have as a SETA? What is it that ESCOM can do? So when we walk out of there, we see products, we see people working, we see an economy that's about to die being revived, and it addresses issues of gender, people of gender that are probably abused because of gender-based violence issues. At least if people can support themselves, you don't have to stay and depend on somebody because you're thinking, where will my next plate come from?
Exactly.
So you're sacrificing your life for a plate of food. So we're saying empower people, give people knowledge, but also give them something to survive. Because if I have my education, we have unemployed graduates, lots of them with master's degrees working on the streets. But then when you check, they are being influenced by social media issues because they don't have a job,
Yeah.
and then they end up in relationships that are compromising and that are not healthy. And therefore, we need to be working together and saying, how do we address them? How do we come up with additional training, something that we call upskilling and cross-skilling people to ensure that they can get enhance their knowledge and training to be able to stand up and say, instead of being a teacher and sitting in the township, I can be a teacher and start a homeschooling center, So that upskilling thing is giving them additional information and say to them, actually, that teaching degree is important. You can actually we can upskill you, you can start homeschooling, you can give extra lessons, you can do training, you can work in an NGO to address all these current challenges that we face as a nation.
I think you've touched a really important point about reskilling. I think this relates to the just energy transition process, really, where we decommission power stations, and we need to ensure that people are then reskilled and reintegrated into the economy. And I just want to link it with the work that you do, because once you've taken your victims through a process of healing, what is it that they come out with, that they have been reskilled with, to be able to then either assist others or to also just sustain themselves and not go back into a cycle of gender-based violence.
It's a very difficult task. I must admit that nobody's got the solution, because if we had it, I think it would be implemented worldwide. The difficulty with reskilling a victim of gender-based violence, of any kind of violence, it could have been financial abuse, it could have been verbal, it could be physical, and across the whole spectrum, is that we have to take our recovery into our own hands. Nobody's going to do the recovery for you. So in terms of upskilling people, it is not a one-off situation where you can teach them. You have to walk alongside people for their recovery and empower them. And we have few organizations that do that. So when we are helping a person, we start at the very basic level. We will help them to get their CVs ready for an interview. But past that point, we don't go, we pass the baton to somebody else. But it is a giant situation because it's linked to the fact that there are not enough jobs. It's also linked to the fact that we are letting the youth down because we've encouraged them to get degrees. I have 20 of them working for me. I know, and they stay. It's not always because they love me, it's because jobs are hard. So it works for me because I love that I can keep them, but the truth is there are no jobs out there. And that's a problem. So what you're upskilling them with has to be something that can sustain them out of the mainstream business opportunity. So it's a very difficult ask. I do not have the solution, but I have the will to stay in.
No, glad you have the will, because we do need that persistence. And just coming back, with looking at the overall work the Commission for Gender Equality does, I know you guys also look at what is called systemic violence in institutions. These could be state institutions, private institutions. What is just the overview landscape, really, of some of the things that we need to do to just counter those systemic type of patterns, really?
Okay, I think it's quite broad. I would say the best thing that, like she's saying, if you're reskilling someone, for instance, right, be mindful of their community, because through stigma, the person can relapse or the reskilling method doesn't work. So I think as a nation, we need to be empowered of what is happening. We should be knowledgeable of what is happening. We should know also the offices to knock when certain situations happen. Then we should also get support from various government departments and other civil society organizations that can channel you through, her organization, so that you get the full support that you want. So I think the gaps in the structures are a lot. Let's say maybe just to round it up to all of us, let's say, for example, if you're starting rural, coming up, semi-urban, up until, the elite, government structures from the local, which is our traditional systems, I think that's where most of our problems are. Because if we still have patriarchy being dominant, we still have maybe culture or tradition clashing, yes, clash between the tradition and culture and the constitution and the law. Automatically, that shows that we are headed for disaster, or we're still heading for disaster, in the sense that the rural people won't experience the benefits of getting financial freedom, getting jobs through the mining sector, getting awareness, getting all the support that they want, all because of that gatekeeping by the traditional leadership or traditional structures, right? Yes, not all the provinces experience that, but most of the provinces, they experience patriarchal leadership, patriarchal norms, patriarchal leadership, and everything that has to do with subjecting women to these norms that no one wants to think of. Right? Then if that part, maybe let's say we come to a realization or an understanding of how tradition and our constitution can work together, not in separate ways, because the tradition is going left, the other one is going right. But can we have a common understanding of how tradition and the constitution can work together? I remember there was an instance where and traditional leaders said they're not even well articulated in the constitution. Their powers and functions are not well written. They don't clearly state where their mandate and powers end, right? So hence they do things according to how they grew up, how they find their forefathers doing things. Like I think it was the issue of when we asked, why do women have to pay certain fees to access land, right? Someone would say, let's say for example, it differs from 450 rand up until 1 million, depending on the hectares or the amount of land that you want. So asking, why would one have to pay 20,000 just to get a maybe less than 50 meters, 50 by 50 meters, just for land, to maybe for residential, to stay with their family? So it starts back from the traditional leaders to say, I grew up knowing that you have to pay to appease the ancestors so that we allow you. But what does our system say constitutionally? Everyone has to have access to land for residential, for business, for what or not, for free, right? But why do they pay? And this is the gap. The traditional leadership says pay, the government says don't pay. Then who advocates for these two laws to be merged into one? That actually favors women. So I still feel that structurally the government departments and the government and there's still gaps that needs to be filled, so that at least there's a uniform kind of legislation that actually empowers women in the entire South Africa. Like she mentioned, that if you empower that one community, which is women, you have actually empowered the whole nation. But right now we've got scarred women, we've got broken women, we've got even broken kids, broken youths, all because of the leadership that exists. Turning from the local leadership, come to the municipality is even worse, because at times it will tell you, no, this is not our jurisdiction. This has to do with the traditional leaders. Then you come to them, no, this is not our powers. This has to do with the Department of What's or Not. So there's that shift blame or blaming game between our structures, and it causes this inequality that exists. And I think it's difficult for us to close that gap. So I think it's a matter of us being trained, being skilled, being knowledgeable. Let our young youth know the constitution, know their rights, know the right offices to knock at. Let's say, for example, talking about the issue of access to information. Is it okay for me to just write to GCIS and say, hey, we need maybe tools for us to access maybe bursaries, to access, mining jobs, to access, funding. How best can you do that? You are knowledgeable as the department. It's easy for you to actually say, just use this website. It's friendly. Call your, maybe we give you a laptop at one of the schools or a desktop to say, come to this particular school every Friday. It's free of charge. You have a representative that actually assists. But now the youth are not trained and well educated. The parents or the mothers, they're not well educated. The fathers are absent. So the system is just flawed. So I don't know how best you can do this, but I just feel there's still a gap that exists between traditional laws or traditional leadership and the constitution, and maybe no one wants to come together and say, let's work together. Okay, we're not saying abolish the traditional norms or cultures whatsoever, but let's work together so that we've got this free and fair, society where women feel our rights are heard, our freedoms are expressed, like as much as the system is harsh, but can we express ourselves? Can we be able to access the economy freely without fear of being judged? Like, for example, let's say in cases of GBV, let's say I've been sexually violated or physically violated. In rural homes, you cannot be out in the public because you'll be made a laughing stock. Or you cannot go and report that case somewhere else because as a woman, you're not allowed to even go and stand before the chiefs or Induna or something of that sort. So how do you go and report your case? Because they say, no, he's your husband, he's supposed to do this. So hence I'm saying, you mentioned 2 million something cases, then there's maybe 10 million cases that are unreported. Or underreported, because you go to the police station, that same person that you meet in the police station is a nephew or a niece of this traditional leader or this justice saving, they just say, no, she's just reporting this case, she just wants to waste our resources. So hence I'm still saying that the system is just flawed. It's intertwined. As much as you want to empower a woman, there's those gatekeepers. Can be the first-hand person that is supposed to actually open the right door. To come to you, there was another case again in Mpumalanga, if I'm correct, where they actually mentioned that you go to government departments or the departments that are supposed to empower you, train you. The first point of contact, who's a security guard, security personnel, or a receptionist, is the one that tells you are not allowed to come here. No, it's closed, because there's this nepotism that exists, especially in the rural space or in the provinces. How dang at least it's it's broad, but you can't go to other provinces like where there's Eastern Cape, Western Cape. Like if you go there, that's where these challenges actually exist. Where there's gatekeeping from the receptionist, you go there, no, you have to sign, no, the box is full, no, come tomorrow, but that person walked or traveled more than 40 something kilometers just to come and drop off or just to inquire and get information. So there's this gatekeeping of access to services that exists, and it closed women potential to sprout and be these women that they want in society. So there's this gatekeeping that exists from us, the government departments, from us, also with us with CGE. Let's say you go and do.
I'd like to bring Karishma in. I'd like to bring Karishma in on this one, and particularly looking at the BBBE Act. That there are laws in this country that actually ensure that women fully participate in the economy, and we will call them maybe designated groups, and I think you've touched a bit on the Women Empowerment Fund, but if you can maybe also just let us know how other designated groups, such as those living with disabilities, are accommodated, those that are youth but again that are women, and how those provisions actually then balance what Tandiwe has said, that in as much as there could be gatekeeping in other structures of society, but there are laws that are actually governing corporate South Africa, as well as the public sector, to ensure that there is a system that guards that women actually benefit, from economic opportunities. So
it's a good question, and something that we've really been thinking a lot about. How do we achieve the goals of government? How do we implement BE as policy where it can be as effective as possible? And so I'll just start with your first question. Yes, we do have funds available for designated groups. So we have specific women empowerment funding. We also have funding for youth that's available. We also target to assist people living with disabilities. And in that sense, we want to work very closely with the Department of Women, Youth and People Living with Disabilities, because we feel like there's a lot more that we can do to support them in terms of making funding accessible for those groups in particular. And that funding is concessionary. So we understand that you need to do more than just give funding. You need to make it easy to repay. You need to put some portion of it to be grant funding so that, these businesses will work. They're not overly leveraged with just debt. So these are things that we do, and like I said, there's a lot of other support that we do give. There's just, hand-holding, a lot of hand-holding, especially when we know we're dealing with someone that hasn't run a business before, somebody that hasn't had the experience, they don't know about perhaps financial management or cash flow management, but they know how to make the product that they're making. They may know how to sell the product, but they don't have the skills to make it commercially viable. So those are the things that we do. But in terms of BEE itself, the one thing that has to happen, it is happening, but it needs to happen, and we need to look at it more closely to refine it as we go along, is setting specific targets for organizations to deliver on these mandates. So I'll give you an example. I mean, with us as the NEF, we've got targets where we have to empower certain groupings. We have to make sure that money goes into rural communities. And when you set targets for an organization, that drives behavior. So if you have a target and says this is the number that you must meet, you will aim at least to achieve that as a bare minimum and then some more. But if you don't have any targets, then you're almost doing it as an aside. And when you talk about empowerment, you've got to do it as a deliberate action. You have to make sure that when you want to empower, you are going out, you are looking for the people that need the empowerment, you're putting in place systems that talk to the gaps in their lives. Because I wanted to talk about what Tandiwe mentioned. You can't treat funding and empowerment the same way for different groupings. If you're dealing with people in Joburg, you're dealing with a totally different group of people. But also, if you're dealing with, let's be honest about it. If you're dealing with males and females, you're also dealing with a different grouping because females, and this is something that I've been reading a lot about. This concept of unpaid work that females have to do. And in places like India, females spend about 6 hours a day doing unpaid work. Men spend 1 hour a day doing unpaid work. Meaning childbearing, meaning cleaning, cooking, taking care of children, making sure that ill parents are taken care of. And in the rural communities, it's even things like access to water, walking with that bucket to collect water, to collect firewood, because the men are not the ones doing that. Men are going out and they're working. But some of the women who do all of this unpaid, a lot of the women that do this unpaid work are also working. Except that they now have 6 more hours of work because they've got to do this and they've got to deliver because they can't afford to live on just one salary. So we have to take into account that funding of women requires something different. It requires us to realize the burden that women carry. And this is something I'm sure all of us around the table can relate to. There's just a lot of things you have to keep track of in your day, other than just getting your job done. Are your kids going to have, what are they going to take to school lunch tomorrow? Have you phoned the school to arrange for extramurals? Have you taken them for their checkup? Your husband needs certain things done, you try to assist with that. You've got to keep your home clean, you've got to make sure your helper, has what she needs. It's so many things in the day that take away our productive time. Those things are important, but it also can serve as something that sets us back as women in being as effective in what we're doing and trying to achieve, and in economic freedom. That really does make a difference, and really we mustn't ignore it, because that is a very big part of why it's so much harder for us to make an impact. And then the other thing is, I do feel very strongly that we need to make opportunities available to people where they are. So expecting a rural woman, or even any woman for that matter, to go from point A to point B and now be employed there, and it's going to mean either she's going to wake up at 4 a.m. to take taxis, and it's going to take her 2 hours to get there, or it's going to mean that she doesn't have someone to take care of her child at home, and now she's traveling far away. These are some of the things. And also sometimes there's stigma relating to moving away from the community that you're in, and now you're going to this big city to work, So you really need to factor in what we are trying to achieve and whom we are trying to assist, because South Africa is a very unique place, and it's got its very own challenges, but also its own opportunities. So if we are very deliberate, we set targets, We say, this is what we want to do, and then we really apply our minds in our various organizations to how can we do it properly. Then we will actually make a difference. And the last point I want to make on this is government as well needs to deliberately set aside budgets in each government department for women-related empowerment, but opportunities, contracts. They need to be set-asides specifically for women and youth and people with disabilities. So not just talk about it, but make this amount of money available that can't be accessed by anyone else, because we want to make sure there's money flowing through these women-led businesses.
Yeah. So I
You know,
think
my experience has been that at least where I've been, all entities of government have got a responsibility of addressing issues that are related to designated groups. My previous employment, I was responsible for transformation and empowerment. And this is similar to what I'm doing now, but there's a target of 25% if it hasn't gone up, which says that budget, the total budget of the organization must be spent on women owned businesses or women programs, right? But the missing link there is the monitoring. And also, we also need to check what programs, which women have you empowered? Have you empowered Carol Motsepe, who is a multimillionaire, and you're ticking a box because you haven't done anything? Carol Motsepe lives in Sandton, she can afford, she owns half the buildings. So how about the rural people, and what have you done to impact them? But the other thing that we also should not forget is the reality is, I come from villages. I move around a lot of villages in provinces that I work in and where I have relatives. We have child-headed households. It's a clear reality. HIV and AIDS has destroyed a lot of people's homes. And then we also have COVID that cleaned out houses. Children lived by themselves, and it's a reality. So even if these programs are in a rural area, how are we ensuring that these kids are being taken care of? They don't have birth certificates, they don't have relatives that are supporting them, some of them are abused. Alcohol is rife. Somehow people don't have money, but they can access alcohol because they need to numb their pain and deal with their sorrows in a different way. What programs do we have in place that are addressing those things? She mentioned something very critical, something that I'm very passionate about: holistic development. Deal with my social issues, psycho issues, while you're giving me a grant, while you're giving me training, while you're giving me a startup kit to start a business. Because I will bring 10 rand at home and we'll have a plate of food. But I have a lot of depression. I have alcoholism. I'm being abused on the side. How are you addressing those things? Because then what are you even doing? Because you've left the real person out of the whole thing, you know? So it's very critical that we don't leave these things. But monitoring and evaluation in this country is something that we have to do. And say, so many billions that go into women empowerment, youth employment, children empowerment, and people with disabilities empowerment. How much of it has really done the real work?
Yes. And I would also add, pushing ourselves to get from that 25% target to say, is it enough? Because even 50-50 is not enough, because women are at such a disadvantage.
So actually it's 45% women.
That
I
sounds
think,
like a better
25% is youth.
So this is also, I think, in reference to the preferential procurement policy, right? You know, that has been passed by government.
Yes.
So I think we are slowly getting there, you know, in terms of the laws. But one of the observations I've made is that we can have a target that says 50%, right, of women to access particular opportunities. But what type of opportunities are they actually
And who's the
accessing?
50%?
Yes.
Yeah, let's look at it can be Carol. I'm an executive, I'm earning a proper salary.
Yes.
But if you have empowered me,
You know,
really, what have you done?
to what extent? Because then you are actually extending the gap,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
So I think it's something that we need to look at. And I wanted to come to you with the sector that you're working in. You know, how difficult is it for women to actually break into mining opportunities? Because there is a stereotype and a perception that it's a very male-led part of the economy.
Cheers. Yeah, you find that women are trying, but it's very difficult because there's funding. I mean, the funds that you need and NEF can also support are very high for you to can even just survey. go to a piece of land and say, we need 10 million to survey and say, yes, we have found minerals in this place. For you to even start digging is, I don't know how many other million. So it's extremely difficult, but it's also a man-led industry where there's lots of gatekeeping, like, hey, who are you? You know, I mean, working in the mine as a woman and down there is difficult as it is, you know, and there's a lot of abuse that happens down there. But imagine now you're trying to be the Motsepe in the mining sector, and you're female and you're starting, you've got no backup, no political connections, you're just starting from nowhere. And you go to NEF, and I don't know how the empowerment fund works. Sometimes they even say, we want a collateral. Where am I going to get it from? You know, I have nothing, but I know maybe I'm an engineer, or I work with geologists that I employ, some of them, by the way, that are advising me, or this is how it can be done. But I don't have any collateral. I don't have any backing, any support, and it's a main man. And they're thinking, now you're coming into my industry, and you're female. Who are you? You know? And people start asking for sexual favors. Now, what about your principles and your morals and your dream? Then eventually you walk away from it, and like, let me just polish my CV.
And maybe just to add on what you're saying, there was, I think it was a trend, I think maybe you might also know, I think it's in Melmoth, KZN, where I think through funding and through the ZILT, or to have a mine and what's or not, so I think it was a group of women, and obvious, maybe they had male, you know, as the leaders, then they came through. So apparently a mine was developed in the area. Right now, as we speak, those potholes or the holes or whatever that they dug, is now a hazard in the community. Their cattle, they actually fall there because they came in, disturbed the whole community. You know, we come here to empower you, we're going to employ women. You know, they came and sold this idea. Then not even a year after this whole introduction, it just stood still. Nothing was done. Those people disappeared, whatever with their cranes, they disappeared. They just left the land like that. Apparently there was air pollution and, you know, all those hazards, you know. Then they left some women pregnant because of the sexual harassment that you're talking about. Some women pregnant, they don't even know now you are pregnant to this man that just came few months, they left, you know. Some lost their jobs because they were promised jobs. You know, let's say you were maybe a housekeeper somewhere, you know, then now you thought, okay, this is closer to home, let me just leave my job. Then those people disappeared, you know. So hence I'm saying that in the mining sector, I think there's a lot of things that you're supposed to take care, to think, you know, as women, is it possible for you to go and work there, your health conditions, you know, but at the same time, you need that income, you know, you need that training as well for you to actually go and, you know, provide for your family, because it's actually difficult for a woman to penetrate into the mining industry. And what's said is the fact that the mining sector actually tells you, as a woman, it's not possible for you to work in the mines. But we're not all saying, let us go work under the mine. Isn't there other opportunities that are tailor-made for women, instead of closing that door to say, there's this, you need these drillers that are more than 100 kg. As a woman, you cannot push them down. But what are we saying? That means you are closing the door for women to actually say, I can try. And you know, what about our children now who are studying engineering, mining? Where are they going to work? These are the graduates that you spoke about that are sitting at home, busy on the streets, you know, advertising their CVs that I'm a mining graduate, but I don't have a job. So if we're saying it's difficult for them to work, create, you know, we create jobs, create something that is tailor-made for women. We can do other things. We can do the management part of it, you know. Even I think in the management part of the mining, most executives, they are male. Why?
So that's what we are trying to address as sitters. We're saying, okay, you've got all these male leaders and executives that are in the mine, but you've got junior managers that are women. So that's why they pay the levy, we train women, and they'll say, no, they don't have, there's a gap, educational gap or knowledge gap. Then we train you. That's why they apply to us, and then we train those women so they can be promoted. But it has to be done. So that's why the monitoring of it has to be very, DMPR is assisting in ensuring that, these people must move there. And the case of the Melmoth, it happens all over the country. I mean, I come from Kwandebele, they just down the road. The people are also digging for stones, precious stones underneath other people's houses, cattle, and people actually fall in there, they drown, you know. So we penetrate those areas and say, even to the traditional leaders, because if you speak to them and you say to them, look at what's happening to your people. They find these precious stones, dig under their houses, they're not doing it properly. We're not gonna stop them, but can we train them to do it properly and safely? And then they agreed in one of the areas, and these people were trained, and but the danger is still there, you know. The danger is always there.
I'd like us to, I think, wrap up our conversation.
Thank you.
This has been a really empowering conversation, and I think if we look at the theme for 2025, it's called Building Resilient Economies for all women. And I think in all your respective areas, you've really unpacked, what are the possibilities. And I think there are more possibilities in other industries, in other sectors that women can definitely look at. But just taking your last rounds, in no particular order, if you can just give a message to women out there who really are interested in participating in the economy, creating opportunities through a value chain. Because what I've picked up from our conversation today is that you need to understand that for someone to be participating fully in an economic opportunity, they have to be psychologically whole, they have to be physically whole, they have to be in an environment where there's no abuse, where there's no discrimination, where there's no biases as well, but also they have to be in a position where they're fully informed about the type of funding that they can access and how that funding can actually catapult them, but also how systems of leadership need to empower, that whole person that is full, that is educated, that is fully skilled and trained, so that when they go and participate, they are a sound person that is making sound decisions, that are able to multiply and ripple into the economy and also take other women along. So that's what I've taken from all of you and piecing together what you've said. But I'd just like your final inputs into this conversation.
I think just starting with myself here, getting off the rudder. Information is there. It's difficult, we know, for other women to access it and understand. So I think, for example, we try and find as much information as you can. We have regional offices all over the country. We work with CT, Community Education and Training Colleges. We have MOUs with them to say, please, on our behalf, provide information to the right people, to all the people in the rural as well as urban areas. We work with TVET colleges, universities, colleges, everywhere. So try and find as much information as you can, but do not never ever give up on yourself. And nothing is absolutely impossible. It's difficult in some areas, but it can happen. It can. All you have to do is just keep on knocking on these doors, because we are here, and we also as women that work for government in this position, we have it's not a job. It's really not a job. We are here to make a difference and ensure that you make the difference that you are being paid. At least you are being paid to make a difference, and don't forget other people. So I believe in this. I won't call it mentorship, by paying forward. What you got if you got a bursary, for example, from the MQA, now you have a job to go and tell other people about the opportunities that you can get from the municipality. Adopt one person, hold another woman's hand and say to them, I can take you along and show you how things are being done. But don't give up, because you can never go there as a perfect person. There'll be something about you that's missing, either psychological, but use available resources that government is providing, and also make sure that the people that benefited before, they are also giving and paying forward for the other people generation that's coming after us.
Maybe I can jump on that. So I think that we really need to, it's basically us around the table and the people that are listening to this, and the women out there that are in roles that give them a little bit of room to do certain things and be at certain tables where other people are not there, that need to do more. Yes, we are getting paid, we do our jobs, but we need to ask ourselves at every step, are we doing enough? Should we be doing something else? Have we created space for anyone else? Have we brought women to into opportunities that we find? If we've got something and we've got a contract, or we've got something that we're looking for and we need a service provider, have we gone out of our way to find a woman-owned business to do that job? Because if we don't do that, it's just very easy to revert to the to the usual, we just get, quotations, we'll go with whoever's cheaper, and, and the world keeps turning. But nothing will ever change. And we really need to be the people that live or walk the talk, and at every point inculcate that same approach and attitude to all the women that we meet along the way. If we are in positions of leadership, we need to make sure we leave those people behind with this thinking that you have a duty to do this. In as much as it seems a little bit unfair that women have to do the extra work of pulling themselves forward, whereas we didn't create the situation. But it has to be done.
Yes.
Because for us to be effective and to get out of the space that we're in, we don't have a choice. And for us to be at the forefront of male-dominated industries, we have to make a deliberate effort. There are gatekeepers, but the women that are there, that are, even if you're not in that organization, if you're in the ministry, if you're in government, and that's part of your portfolio, go the extra mile to ensure that women are given a seat at the table, because once a woman is given a seat at the table, they will do their best. They will shine. But the problem is getting the seat at the table, and we need to ensure we create those seats.
I think I'll speak on three things. The first one, I would say, as a woman listening to this or hearing this, you're supposed to be your other woman's voice. Because I might be voiceless today, you might be, able to speak on my behalf. Especially like turning to the rural women, to the women in townships where they don't have access to, Wi-Fi, they don't have access to smartphones. Let us be their voices. That's number one. Then number two, I want us as women to be as inquisitive as we can be when it comes to accessing resources that are tailor-made for us. Like there's training, that is easily accessible, but because we don't have knowledge on that information. So if you are inquisitive, you see one woman striving, I ask, how did you do it? Which office did you knock at? Let's not be quick to point fingers and say the government is failing, someone is escalating, someone is sleeping with the boss. To be, let's be inquisitive. How best can I make my life as a woman better? How best can I make my community? How best can I empower myself before empowering others? Like earlier, we had a discussion about empowering boy child, right? How best can I do that? How do I become economically better than what I am today? There are opportunities like the funding that is available, there's training that is available. Let us be inquisitive about services that are tailor-made for us. Then the last thing that I want to say, let's not discourage ourselves. Whatever that you think you can be, you can be.
Yes.
Just push hard. It might seem dark today, but tomorrow shines. Like this is the August month where things are a little bit difficult. We're being, reminded of our painful stories, our situations, things that are not going well, but September is coming, it's sprouting, it's spring, let's be positive. Even economically, we can be better people, opportunities are there. Let's read, let's knock in offices. One day our chance will come. Thank you.
I think, Mari, you have the last word.
One of the things that I've loved about being with you today is we're all on the same page, and that's a very important thing. So I think that what we need is more education in our country, and to that end, we are going to be starting a GBV educational program, as in we do education on the floor now, but we're going to start a training facility for GBV where people can come. We have launched our trial. We did it with the National Shelter Movement, and we've been given office space or an old shop in Benmore Gardner Shopping Centre, which we're busy shop fitting, because the way to help other women is to educate them as well. And I think that's been at the bottom of everything we've spoken about. So my message is that, as you said, you should access every bit of information that you can, because we all don't know it all, as you said, but the information is most often available. And the other thing is, for one of us, we want to help you. We all love South Africa. We all want to make it grow. And we've all got time to give you. So be brave today. Send that email.
Thank you. I think that was such a befitting call to action. Be brave today. Make that call and send that email so that you can be empowered and you can be part of a nation that works for all. And from us today, with the Public Sector Manager Magazine Roundtable, we are saying, Aibe Boroko.